Right. Well, thanks for being patient. I know you may have some questions, but I just want to ask you for a few more minutes, allowing Paulo to provide some comments before we open for questions, and also invite some comments from Manuel Vieira as well. So, Paulo, we got the overall macroeconomic and property outlook for these two economies. I would like to understand from you, based on your experience in Angola, I know that you lived there for the past 10 years, what is the story about Angola? And in this boom and bust cycle, where do you see Angola currently? So, you can use this one.
Hello, hello? Yeah? Okay. Angola has come from a long way. Since its independency, it had almost a 40-year war, civil war. The whole country got destroyed. So that's the first fact that we need to take into consideration. From that, they are rebuilding the country. Good or bad, maybe if you take Europe as an example, they also had a Marshall Plan, and then after, which was quantity, and then only in the second phase they started to work on quality. Angola is going through that. They did a lot of quantity, mainly Chinese built, but they're now going into the quality phase. Angola has a very high spending and a lot of resources. If you look at how Angola is today, let me give you an example, a South African example, ShopRite. Angola is number 1 on ShopRite's list. It has the highest turnover per ShopRite, per unit, and per square meter. So doing business, it's difficult, yes, but it has also its benefits. It all depends on if you are on the ground, if you understand the local dynamics, and understand how to work with that. Furthermore, I would also like to mention that after the independency, after the wars, Angola had to accommodate, and as mentioned by both of you, hello? Yeah. Had to provide accommodation for the oil and gas industry, which have their own specific standards, safeties, and its security, etc., etc. So there was a low supply of that type of properties in the market. The oil and gas companies started to outbid each other towards the few available properties that were on the market. They were even buying into projects that weren't really projects, they were just brochures. It was a hectic period. Prices, as you can understand, due to this type of demand, skyrocketed. Angola was for X years the most expensive city in the world. I want to repeat it. And Luanda was the most expensive city in the world. Imagine this, third world country, and you have, for instance, for offices, asking price was between 120 to 150 in CBD, US dollars per square meter per month. This is massive. Now, with the oil and gas crisis, of course, there came a correction. Prices went down. I have to say that the sales prices of properties also came down, not in terms of asking prices, as you've mentioned correctly, but yes, in terms of the final transaction prices. So developers maintained speculatively high asking prices, but there was a larger bandwidth to negotiate. As mentioned also correctly, the rentals came significantly down. On the other side, we see that there are a lot of positive things coming up, because every crisis also brings its opportunities. It brings opportunities for who wants to come into a dip. That's where you make the best investments. But also for the country to restructure itself, to look back into its own and understand what needs to be done, how can I become competitive, what can I do different to maintain my tenant XYZ in my property. I need to upgrade my property, I need to bring better services in. It's not a new thing for Africa, but it's something that Angola is very focused on. Angola is focused at the moment in bringing the right infrastructure into the country. Not only for residentials, but also from a logistical point of view. They are heavily, as my colleague also mentioned about Mozambique, investing in the ports, in logistic parks, and of course now the recent privatization that has been announced of several state-owned or Sonangol-owned companies. That goes from National Telecom, the top telecom firm, where even foreign entities have got a stake in, like the Brazilian Oi, to health care units, hospitals, so to say, etc., etc. It's a moment of opportunity currently in Angola.
Paulo, thank you very much. I think there are similarities between both countries. Some countries providing some good examples, and others still a long way to go before investors are comfortable. Before we open for questions, I would like to ask Manuel Vieira, how do you see the regulatory environment in Mozambique developing between now and in the next few years, and some background about that as well, if you can comment.
I think,
property sector point of view.
well, firstly, I think most important is the law that protects all private investment into the country, and that guarantees the ability to repatriate your profits. So basically you're guaranteed against privatization or the government just taking your property, and once you've paid your final taxes and you've got your tax clearance certificate, you're able to repatriate. Apart from that, the industry is not very well regulated. We have few associations, that be it from the brokers, that everybody's a broker in Mozambique, to the construction. I think it's poorly regulated. Government makes some attempt at regulating it, but fails mostly. And I think we're seeing some efforts by the government now to create professional bodies to get the industry to be regulated.
Okay. Thank you. I think one common element in both countries is that land belongs to the state, but once there is development on the land, it becomes private property. So then investors are issued with a title, which becomes, I mean, for all purpose, private property, and so there is some level of security that investors will take from there. I would like to open for questions. You may have questions. Please raise your hand. I'm not sure if there's microphone available, but I can share with you mine.
Hi, I want to thank Paulo and Manuel for the excellent presentation, and my question primarily regards Paulo and the Angolan market, and my question regards the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative and the various kinds of investments and construction projects primarily that have been taking place in Angola in the past few years. So there are several special economic zones, rail projects, intermodal terminals and stuff like that that have been undertaken by Chinese state-owned enterprises. And I'm kind of interested in what your take is as far as industrial real estate goes in Angola.
So, it's an interesting one. After the Civil War, the international community was not really interested in investing into a devastated country. China was the one who took that on itself and had some confidence, of course backed up by the significant oil production, the crude production that Angola had, and they're taking off roughly 40% of Angola's crude production to pay for all those initiatives. Nothing comes for free. And that was part of what I mentioned earlier, the Marshall Plan, the quantity. So they came in with massive infrastructure works, unfortunately not with quality. So a lot of them is lacking quality and needs to be redone. But we're seeing a lot happening. In terms of logistics, there are two things. One, the Angolan state is getting rid of some public initiatives that they have done in the past, which is the Z, the Zone Special Economic, Special Economic Zone, which they've recently sold for half of the price of what was originally valued. 18 million versus 30 million, something like that. On the other hand, they are focused currently on bringing in logistic parks. Some of them that have already started roughly 10 years ago. One of them is, for instance, the CLOT, which is a program of 5 logistic platforms distributed all over the country. Another one is focusing on the ports, and then mainly the Lobito port, which is a deep sea port halfway down, going to Namibia, which is a railway connection to the hinterland. And it has, there are several very interesting things going on at the moment. There is an extremely large fertilizer company about to settle there, one of Africa's largest. There is a construction materials company going to set up a manufacturing plant over there. There's several interesting things already happening in that region. You can also see that on the northern part of Luanda, a region that's called the Dande, there's also a big project that has already been announced during the previous presidency, taken over by the current presidency. They've shifted a few players, and that's also about to take form. The country has a full understanding, as was shown in the graphics a little bit earlier, that it needs to diversify its economy. It's like Mozambique. They've also discovered N different types of minerals. Phosphate is currently going very strong. Other metallics, the Israelis, they're now exploring phosphate. They're very focused on agricultural local production. Supermarkets, the big supermarket chains, including ShopRite, is already buying part of what it's selling locally. So it's not importing everything from South Africa anymore. So you can see there's a shift in terms of diversification of what's happening within Angola. Now, a big problem is, for the international community, it speaks Portuguese. And that's difficult. Ce n'est pas français, it doesn't speak English, but fala português. And in that perspective, we often think that, crap, it's only 2 countries in Africa that speak that, we're not going to invest in those countries. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, there are around 300 million people in the world that speak Portuguese. Most of the Southern Hemisphere speaks Portuguese. So if you take that all into account and have production for Portuguese-speaking countries, it's a massive market.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm not sure if we have time for another question. Maybe we can take one more. I can see one hand in the back. Yes, the mic is going in your way. Please state your name and you're free to put the question.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm Henning Rasmus from Paragon Architects. These conferences are fascinating. I've been coming here for a few years, and there's this big divide, or this shift actually, because somehow we as a South African business community have this thing that we represent business as usual. It's sort of a thing that we do and that we export. I think it's a self-perception. And then I've worked in Angola since 2002, for example, in Mozambique a bit later, and we don't properly understand post-conflict countries. But having said that, like the whole point of working in Angola is don't think business as usual exists around you in any way, and then if your point of being there is not to try and drive business as usual, you can achieve a lot. It's when you think that you must do business like we do it that you fail in places like Angola. But I have a question, and this relates to business as usual, and especially in post-conflict countries, but it's actually a question for both Angola and Mozambique sitting there. What is the percentage of property development that's funded by money laundering in those 2 countries? Because we come from manufactured products, and you're competing with people who have no funding costs. So what percentage is that? Doesn't mean you can't play, but you're actually competing with people every day who have no funding costs. So your perception on that, I'm just interested in your perception of the proportion of stolen money versus funded projects. I'm not saying either are good or bad. Thanks.
I'm going to speak about the Mozambican experience. Up until 2013, during the good years, the real estate was funded particularly by the Asian community. In 2013, we had the height of the kidnappings. This is a phenomenon you don't have here. You have violent crime. There we have kidnapping, and they ask for a ransom. I think we've only had 1 or 2 bad endings to the hundreds of kidnappings that have happened, but they happen. And what happened to this community is that they started putting their kids and their wives outside the country. Eventually, they also started spending more time outside the country. Today, a lot of them were my friends, are not interested in coming back to Mozambique. Their kids don't want to hear about Mozambique. They've either settled in Dubai or they've settled in Portugal. They don't want to come back. So those investors in 2014, 2015 disappeared, and they're never coming back. We've had other communities moving in, and we are certain it's money laundering. I can't quantify how much it is. It's significant. All I can tell you, we do business. We tell people to go put the money in the bank. We don't take cash from anybody. And we tell that to our developers as well. Paul, you want to comment as well?
In the Angolan context, I can give you an example of 2013-14, where there was a retailer says warehousing chain that had money coming from ISIS. That was immediately knocked out, ownership taken away. So from that perspective, it's very strong. If you look at the local ownership of the main property developments, yes, there's a significant percentage which belongs to PEPs, so to say, which makes it difficult for certain companies to pass it through their due diligence. I had still very recently, a couple of weeks ago, a request from a large client asking for a specific property in a certain region within Luanda, where we know by heart that 80+% belongs to PEPs, and they said it has to be a non-PEP. So that makes it challenging. Nowadays we see that there is a mixed ownership of Asians, Brazilians, Israeli communities, and mainly Portuguese. There is an international community that's now starting to look at Angola because of its recent reforms, because it has a clear property legislation, not only in terms of ownership, but also in terms of construction. The whole brokerage has finally gotten a new law there that's now being reinforced, and together as a board member of we call it the APIMA, but the Angolan Research Association, work together with the Ministry of Construction and Housing in putting and reviewing those new legislations that are coming in and making them adapt to not from a public point of view, but mainly from an operator private point of view. And that's something that I find very encouraging currently in Angola. There's a real focus on what does the end user need. Even Ministry of Justice is getting into this, and they have set up an arbitration forum for exactly for those real estate disputes, so that there are no issues about land titles, who is who. It's getting out of that informal procedure and getting into a more strict formal market. I hope this answers it.
Thank you very much, both of you, and thank you for the questions. We know we're running out of time. I mean, from both the presentations and interventions and the comments here, I think there is opportunities in both countries, but maybe the key takeaway that we take from here is that while there is risk, there is return as well. But if we rely on desktop valuations, perhaps we can make wrong decisions. So I would invite you to, if you have interest in investing in these countries, make a field trip and find out a little bit more. Not to forget that the language could be a barrier. It's not like one size fits all. I think as a prudent investor, there are certainly opportunities in Mozambique, with GDP expected to grow at more than 10% per year for many years because of the oil and gas. Angola changing from a less compliance environment into a better compliance environment with improvements in governance, and perhaps the privatizations program bringing a lot of opportunities in the property sector. So I would encourage you to make your decisions with information on the ground, visiting these countries and not making desktop valuations for your projects. Thank you very much. And perhaps, yes, we'll be around. So if you want to engage with more questions, please feel free to engage us directly. Thank you very much.